You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So we just got through doing our pre-record for our Book of Boba Fett review, which will premiere on Monday at 8, because unfortunately, I know you're going to be out of town. I'm probably going to be working late, so of course we didn't want you guys to miss out on a Monday show. And being that it's a season finale of the Book of Boba Fett, hey, we had to do the review together, and we had to do all that stuff. So we pre-recorded the show. It's going to premiere Monday night at 8. And that's about all I have to say about that, as Forrest Gump would say. So, speaking of which, though, and this has more to do with episode 6, because I remember last Friday when we did our show, this was a show that we were thinking about doing, but it was like, we better not do it because you really need to see the Book of Boba Fett episode 6 to really understand the context, and we didn't want to really give away too many spoilers about that before we did our review. Because I remember even last Friday, we were tiptoeing around everything. I remember you're kind of like, well, do I say this? And I'm like, look, just say it, do whatever, it's fine. But yeah, I mean, we had to be really careful about what we said because we didn't want to talk about episode 6 too much because we wanted to do that in our actual review. So fortunately, we can talk about this now, and that is a possible Mandalorian connection in the Obi Wan series, because when you see the Book of Boba Fett episode 6, there is a flashback scene that Luke basically, initiates, where Grogu flashes back to Order 66, and you see this really cool Clone Wars scene where the clones are attacking these 3 Jedi that are protecting him. And so the question then becomes, who's actually protecting Grogu? Because obviously he got out of there. Was it Obi Wan? Was it Yoda? You know, who was it? So that's what we're actually going to explore today. And maybe beyond that, we're also going to look at what are we going to see in The Mandalorian Season 3 as it relates to some of this tie-in. Are we going to see anything in the Obi Wan series? So there's a couple of different theories that have been proposed about this. Obi Wan would probably be the obvious choice, but there are some who think that it could have actually been Yoda that did it, and maybe he took him to Dagobah, maybe he trained him a little bit. I mean, who knows? By the way, Ronaldo's joining us. So, hey, what's up, Ronaldo?
What's up, man?
What's going on? So I think that this is a really good topic to talk about, simply because now that we've pretty much had the season finale of the Book of Boba Fett, which, again, we're reviewing on Monday's show, we have a better idea, I think, of what we might expect for The Mandalorian Season 3. And again, we could basically talk about this without really giving away too much or cutting into our review, because overall, we know that The Mandalorian now is probably going to focus more on the whole conquering of Mandalore, the Darksaber, who's going to rule it, Bo-Katan, all that stuff. But the question really becomes, who do you think protected him, and what ramifications do you think that that's going to have on the Obi-Wan series, on the Mandalorian Season 3, maybe Season 2 of the Book of Boba Fett, maybe Season 1 of Ahsoka? What are you thinking?
Well, definitely Obi-Wan does come to mind. I mean, and if you want to, tie things in, I mean, that would be a great tie-in, is to have Obi-Wan, rescue little Grogu, especially because of his fondness for Master Yoda. So, of course, you have that type of connection right there. And he's already kind of taken the child with him anyway, baby Luke. So, you never know. You just never know exactly how that's going to play out. What's also interesting, and I've heard there's a couple other theories I've seen, and I have to go back and look at this because I'm just going off what's been said. I can't confirm it myself, However, they said in that flashback scene there was a crest that was shown, and it was supposed to be of Barris Offee, and they said Barris Offee might be making a return into the Mandalorian. So that's a possibility as well. And then there was just also finally the Bad Batch. They said the Bad Batch could have actually been commissioned to actually grab Grogu and secure him because, they're their special elite force, and, that's kind of like what they do. So that's a possibility as well. But if I had to bet my money on anything as far as what I think they were going to do, it's going to be Obi Wan.
All right, well, that does it for our show.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. That was a 6-minute long show. Well, no, but I mean, I think that one of the important things that you have to look at whenever you look at something like that, because again, this is one of those shows that we're doing that's almost, I mean, not quite, but it's almost pure speculation because there have been a lot of complaints about a lot of things in general when it comes to the Book of Boba Fett, when it comes to the Mandalorian. I mean, one of the biggest complaints is that in some ways, the things that happen in episodes 6 and 7 of the Book of Boba Fett almost undoes the season finale of Mandalorian season 2. Because if you think about it, it's like, all right, man, I completed my mission. Here you go. Now you're with your kind. And it was this really cool moment, and we saw Luke, of course, wrecking shop at the end of that. And then Book of Boba Fett comes along, and it's like a different outcome completely. And even though it's great that we get an expansion of the storyline, and it does sort of tie in things, and we mentioned this, and you'll see on Monday, how in a lot of ways, it's actually freeing up the Mandalorian Season 3 to focus strictly on Mandalore and all that. I think it's interesting that they give us that flashback scene because it unlocking the memories of Grogu, I think, is really important. And I think that that's going to play into things later on. I think that it's not just like, okay, this is isolated to this one little time when he was training with Luke. I think that you're going to start to see maybe more of the story unfold. Now, I have not heard that whole Barris Offee thing. That's really interesting. And you I mean, that basically, that just came from like somebody spotted a crest or something in that flashback.
Yeah, they said in that scene, I'm gonna try to figure out where it is and whatnot, but they said it's the crest of the whole Barris Offee.
Like, who even knows that?
Undo.
It's
who knows.
I know. I mean, I just
come on now, but
I mean, if you think about it, first of all, if you even know that crest, my hat's off to you. But the fact that you can spot it, well, that's it.
Well, probably froze the frame, and it probably was trying to look at every little detail about that.
I know, man. I here's the thing that is really freaking me out about that, though, is the fact that I know there are fans out there. And again, it sounds like I'm picking on, because if we have anybody that watches the show, last thing I want to do is offend anybody, right? But I do have to say, diplomatically speaking, I'll put my inner Princess Leia thing going here. Diplomatically speaking, if you're the type of zealot fan that actually goes through these scenes frame by frame, which you would almost have to do to catch something like that, that's just a level of dedication. A level of dedication I'm afraid I do not possess.
Correct.
On the other hand, it's because of people like that, though, that we get to talk about things like this. So let's start things off with Ronaldo. He says, I think it was Barris or a totally new character. Well, way to commit there, buddy. That would be like us going, well, it was either Obi Wan or Yoda. So which do you think it is? I mean, is it Barris or is it a new character? It would make sense. I actually like what you said. I like the whole Bad Batch idea, actually. Because I really
Yeah, I
think
mean,
that what they're doing is I think that they're starting to try to tie in. I mean,
all the
obviously,
shows.
yeah, because the Book of Boba Fett and the Mandalorian are really tied together strongly. I think Ahsoka is going to join that to where you're going to get this, like this trinity of shows where they're just going to keep crossing over. It's almost like it's going to be one big show and it's just divided up into parts. But I think that what they're also trying to do is take something like an Obi Wan series or the Bad Batch animated series and maybe tie that in too, and perhaps give us some background. So when we see in the Book of Boba Fett where Grogu has a flashback, now we go back to, maybe the Bad Batch or something, and maybe it shows us something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that um, this whole web of shows that they got going on. We got, sometimes we got Bad Batch that's supposed to be making another return.
Mm-hmm.
You got Obi Wan that's coming up in May. You have we got season 3 of Mandalorian that's probably going to premiere at the end of the year. So yeah, I mean, I think the whole intertwining of these shows is really good because it keeps everybody hooked. And like I said, they're doing this a lot in televisions, especially series based stuff that all kind of come out with things like Marvel, of course, is kind of one of the front runners that's done it. But then now you're starting to see other shows, things like the hit series Power, right? Now they have all these spinoffs, but they're all kind of interconnected with each other in some way, shape, or form. So it's really just cool, and I think a lot of people are really catching on, and fans really love that because it always kind of keeps you engaged in the overall picture. Like you always said, like there's a bigger picture, and it's like you have to watch these other shows to get pieces of the puzzle to create this big picture. And I think that's probably what we're really getting, which is cool. I mean, I'm perfectly fine with that, and I actually love it. Um, but as far as like with Grogu, and that's kind of the thing is it's kind of funny how this little character has kind of become like a pivot point in
Mm-hmm.
all of this because it's like although he's like in the Mandalorian and he shows up early, and of course Mandalorian is a pivot point too, but he doesn't necessarily have to be in everything now. Like he doesn't have to be in Ahsoka, but I could see Grogu being in Ahsoka. You see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
Like because you could still tell his story from the Jedi perspective because that's where he comes from, right?
I think you have to fill that
So
in because if you say, okay, he's 50 years old, and right from the very beginning when they first said that, which I don't know, he debuted in what, episode 1 or 2 of The
to
Mandalorian, like at the end or something, where you saw the little, fingers.
mhm.
And as soon as you saw this character and you knew how old he was, I mean, every fan already is doing the math. Oh,
Yeah,
wait, if
because like in
he's
the Clone
50, that
Wars,
means, right, because,
he was like
every
20
fan,
something.
exactly, every fan is doing the math. Well, yeah, I mean, it could be. There's 19 years between episode 3 and 4. There's probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years plus 6, so another 11. So 29, 30. I mean, yeah, he could have been like 20 years old
Like his
during the
mid
time
to
of the
late
Clone
20s.
Wars, maybe 15, somewhere in there. But again, as fans, we're all doing the math. As soon
Hmm.
as you tell us the age of a character, everybody's going, oh, I wonder how old he was during episode 1 or 2 or 3, and did they
Hmm.
know Yoda and all this. And so once you introduce that and you realize, hey, this character's been around, what makes him pivotal, more so than even the Mandalorian or anything like that, is he's another character that's been around since that time period. You're always
Hmm.
going to see that type of a thing. You look at a character like Moff Gideon, you start to go, oh, well, he served under Palpatine or something. And you start to make these connections, and that fills in some things about the characters and maybe what their motivations are and things like that. So the first question that we had in The Mandalorian was, well, Grogu was actually around during that time. how much interaction did he have? What did he learn? What's his deal? And that's being revealed.
Well, yeah, because see, and this is the big mystery. This is why I say he's such a pivot point, is because, like you said, to your point, he was around during the prequel era. I mean, yeah, the prequel era, obviously. But what's really strikes me is the original trilogy era. And because see, I'm starting to understand why he was made to kind of forget a lot. Either he was made to forget or he just wasn't around it, so he kind of just lost the muscle memory, so to speak, I guess. Because right after the Order 66, of course that purge never really stopped.
Right.
Now, okay, yeah, you kind of had the initial shock and awe of it all, but then like, okay, that we got in like Revenge of the Sith. But then after that, okay, Vader was sending his Inquisitors out. Now, we know Yoda's species is ripe with the Force. All right. So he's a super powerful little guy. And he's already had some training. So, that type of power is all. I mean, look what happened to Yoda. That's why Yoda had to seclude himself on Dagobah and hide and amongst all this life just to mask his presence. So, how was Grogu being masked, or how did he even get away and get off people's radar for so long? Because when you got people like Vader and the Emperor who would love to have a Yoda on their side, forget Luke. Well, I won't say forget Luke, but if they had one or the other, like, okay, well, we can't get Luke or Leia. Let's get this little guy.
Well, and again, you have to remember, and this is brought up in The Mandalorian over and over again, and they've more or less officially confirmed this, but it's Grogu's blood that they took, his DNA, to make Snoke and to resurrect the Emperor. So he ties in very heavily into the plot thread of pretty much what connects the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy. So here you have this guy, he's been around since the beginning, and that's the thing. One of the things to me that always makes a character somewhat pivotal, and really, I guess important would probably be the best term, is the fact that you have these characters who become these connective threads that tie the trilogies together and really strengthen that bond. And we're learning a little bit more because, again, we knew that that was the reason why Moff Gideon wanted him when we saw The Mandalorian Season 1. The whole thing was Din was supposed to get Grogu, take him to, I keep forgetting what Werner Herzog's character was, but eventually he was supposed to go to Gideon. And then, of course, they wanted him, basically extract his blood and set the whole resurrecting of the Emperor in motion. Of course, we didn't know that at the time, but you have this little character, and like you said, the original trilogy is really where it gets interesting, because where was he? And that's the whole point of this discussion. Who protected him? So in other words, who got him out of there? And then where is he?
Who watched over him? Yeah, who watched over him? Because like my thing is when we first meet him in season 1 of The Mandalorian, it's like, all right, well, he was unattended. He was just kind of in this thing. It was a tracker. And my thing is like, okay, well, who found out about him anyway?
Right.
Because why would you even have a bounty on something that you know nothing about?
Yeah, I mean, there's
the Emperor's dead. I mean, because you got to think about it. The Emperor's dead. Vader's dead. Luke doesn't even, he just became a Jedi Knight. So it's just like no one really know. I mean, to our knowledge, no one even knows who will be a Force user, at least.
Well, I mean, it's a good point, right? Because now when Obi Wan and Yoda were sort of having that conversation when Luke flew off, and Yoda's like, "Well, there is another." You never see that conversation between Vader and Emperor. Well, if he won't turn, I mean, he's going to be destroyed. But it's not like the Emperor's like, "Well, listen, I know this little baby Yoda thing running around that we can always snag if Luke doesn't do it." And of course, their original plan too, that you find out a little bit later. Well, because Vader found out later, is like, oh, wait, you have a sister? And you got to wonder at this point, is Vader going, how many kids did I actually have? Because
Well, my other question is, and to that point though, while we're kind of hanging out here, that conversation between Yoda and Obi Wan that happened after Luke left.
yeah, in Empire, yeah.
Oh, okay, never mind. Because I was wondering, because he was like, when he asked Obi Wan, he said, "Well, Yoda spoke of another." I'm
Yeah,
trying to remember what did Yoda say
well,
that
yeah, I mean, the thing about it was, and that's a good point,
because did
because
he say anything in Return of the Jedi? Because that's what I'm trying to think. Because like when Yoda and Obi Wan had that conversation, Luke was already X-wing. He was
no,
already in
he did,
flight,
he did, because it was when Yoda was basically dying, and he said
dying
there is another, he
under the
kind of choked it
Skywalker.
out. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
Skywalker. Yeah, that's right.
and
Yeah,
then it's
and that's when Luke.
and then
That's when Luke kind of had that like shock face. Like, wait, there's another one. Like, that's another one of me.
at this point,
Where?
if I were Luke, I'd be like, could you guys just please give me the whole picture? Could you just
Yeah, because like
spell it
first you
out
didn't
for
want to
me?
tell me about.
These are things that I could, this is knowledge that would probably come in handy for some of this stuff.
Yeah, you keep telling me to be mindful of my feelings. Well, how? I can't mind my feelings if I don't even know this stuff exists until it pops up on me. How do you think I'm going to react? But anyway, that's a whole nother.
Yeah, that's
Anyway,
a tirade for another time. But
yeah.
so yeah,
So
you do
going
wonder though,
into
where does Grogu fit into all this, right? Because Yoda and Obi-Wan obviously know about him. Of course,
Mhm.
look, let me just say, in the interest of any casual fans that might be watching this, yeah, we know that it wasn't written yet. Okay, we know that Grogu was basically created in 2020 or something, and this was done in 1980. We get
Right,
that, but you have to work with us because part of what happens when you grow a franchise over 40 or 50 years is you have to try to, in universe, explain this stuff. And
right.
that's what we're attempting to do now. See, that's why I actually like topics like this one, because sometimes the topics will just follow the news and, we'll discuss whatever the latest thing that everybody's talking about with Star Wars. But something like this, it's relevant and it's current to what's going on, but it's more of a discussion topic. You can go anywhere with this.
Well, yeah, and so we know that okay, he was in the prequels. We know he's definitely around doing the original trilogy.
Right?
Now, once again, who had him and where was he? Because when we eventually find him in Mandalorian season 1, like I said, when Din walks upon him, he's unattended. And it's like there was a tracker out on him because that's how he then found him in the first place. So my thing is like, okay, well, who knew about him? I mean, I guess Gideon, of course, but like how though? Like how was he even spotted to even know like, hey,
You
that's a
know,
Yoda. You know what I mean?
you're
Like, basically.
you're
And
basically
then
bringing up all kinds of stuff I never even thought about, because here we are seeing him, and it's like, well, who had him up until that point? And hey, look, forget about what he was doing during the original trilogy. What was he doing
he
in the
probably was
6 years
sleeping.
between Return of the Jedi and the Mandalorian? Because, like you said, he was just kind of out there up for grabs.
Yeah, and it's not like he was like, he's like a full size Yoda or anything. I mean, he's a baby. He's in a little carriage or
Yeah,
stroller or
he
whatever you want to
can't.
call that
Right?
thing. So it's like now one of the other speculations that they said was Quinlan Voss had him. That's another speculation that's been out there.
Yeah, but see, the problem with that is Quinlan Voss. Trying to remember at the end of Dark Disciple, I know Asajj dies. He may
Hmm.
have too, but I don't.
And maybe that's why he was left unattended. Maybe somebody else just kind of, you know, picked
Well,
him up or
yeah,
something.
let's put a little pause on this for a sec, because I want to get to all these chats that Ronaldo's coming in with. So he says, Bad Batch saving Grogu is not as interesting as a Jedi saving him, I think. I don't know. Personally, I think that the Bad Batch is actually a more interesting storyline because the Jedi is kind of obvious. And granted, you can go different areas, but it's almost like even when Ahsoka finds him, it's almost like, oh, well, I didn't know he was still around. Yeah, I could tell you his name and all this other stuff, but that's because she talks to him. I don't know. In that episode of The Mandalorian, I don't know if Ahsoka just remembered him or if because she was talking to him and it's like, oh, yeah, it says his name is Grogu or something.
Yeah, no, she basically probed his mind, basically.
Yeah.
And she was kind of communicating through the Force, basically.
Right. So it's not like she remembered, but like, oh, yeah, you, the little baby Yoda kid, I mean, it wasn't like that.
Because she even says, like, oh, you remind me of... Because
Right.
she said the same thing that Luke said, basically. Like, oh, yeah, you remind me of... or she was saying it to Den, like, he reminds me of a Jedi Master that, we all knew or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. So it's kind of interesting because, now granted, he could have just been... But you would think that because there's not a whole lot of beings that are Yoda's species, you'd think he would have stuck out. Like, people would have remembered him.
Well, yeah, but the other thing we also have to remember too is that, with him, and this is the weird thing. See, because him being a youngling, like he looks like a youngling, but he's really like 20.
I know.
So I don't know if that's considered a youngling. Like, I mean, of course, there's a youngling in their species, but
It depends on how old. I mean, a youngling could just be a kid. Because remember, the Jedi take all beings as infants,
right? Well,
because they want to raise them. And he's
exactly. So that's my point. Is like, okay, was he raised as an infant? Because in his current state, he's still a child in his own species. But that's what I was talking about, when I said, when does his training or his competency begin? Because it's like, okay, he could have been with a master by now.
Well, I mean,
in other words, he's a Padawan already.
Well, that's the
You see
thing.
what I'm saying?
See, yeah, you go youngling, Padawan, knight, master,
Knight.
grandmaster. So the difference between a youngling is from infancy to whenever you can, because you're learning the basics, almost like that little classroom that Yoda had, the truly wonderful mind of a child, all that stuff. That's almost like the grammar school liberal arts version of the Jedi Academy, right? This is where you're learning all the basics, all the
ABCs
real
and 1, 2, 3s.
Yeah, exactly. When you're a Padawan, that's when, okay, now it's time for you to study with a master. Now it's time for you to, this is really the meat of the training. And then, of course, you go through the trials and all that, and you become a knight and all this other stuff.
So the question is, what stages was Grogu in?
Well, and also because when you look at chapter 6 of the book of Boba Fett, and Luke is all like, well, I don't really know how much I'm teaching him. He's really more like he's remembering.
Exactly.
Well, he must have been trained or something then. So
exactly.
Who trained him? How much was he trained? Yeah, I mean, see, this stuff actually gives you more questions than answers. Typical Star Wars, actually.
Yep.
Oh, let's see. So Ronaldo goes on to say, I've heard some theories that Mace did it. I don't think that's correct. The only way
I've heard that too.
Yeah, but I mean, that doesn't really make sense unless, because there has been a whole thing going on about let's bring Mace back because he didn't really die, because we never saw him die. It's one of those, we didn't see the body. And I mean, if you think about it, it's true. All they did was chop off his hands and send him out the window. I mean, he's a Jedi. He could have slowed his descent. He could have... There are ways he could have technically... Yeah, he could have survived that.
I mean, Anakin is jumping off of speeders and that type of stuff.
I mean, it's plausible. It's not unlikely, but hey, listen. If Darth Maul can survive his injuries, Mace could survive his.
That is true.
So I will go along with that. If Palpatine can survive, even though there's a little bit of Sith magic going on in there, but still, they can find a way to bring Mace back if they want. The only problem that I have with that, though, is that unless he survived and he sort of hid out and he somehow snuck back in and took Grogu somewhere, it really wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, because at the time that Mace went and faced Palpatine, even though the Republic was falling at a rapid rate at that point, it was still pretty much intact, right? I mean, Palpatine, he was right at the edge of going, you know, I'm kind of done playing this benevolent guy. I'm about to go all Sith on everybody. He was still playing that role, though. So there was really no reason for them to really hide Grogu anywhere, because all of the stuff that happened with the Jedi just kind of happened all at once. You know, they went to arrest Palpatine, and he wiped them all out. And then Anakin then, you know, the Order 66 was launched after that. And then Anakin went and stormed the temple. There wouldn't have really been time. Somebody that was around would have had to have done it. And of course, it could have been a handoff too, right? Because Obi Wan was pretty busy, as was Yoda. So it could have been that maybe Yoda, because he was still around the Jedi Temple at that point, he might have like hidden Grogu away somewhere. And then after the events of Episode 3, somebody else, like a Barasafi or whatever, could have taken him off world, or the Bad Batch. Because that really goes back to, that's why I say it would have been more interesting if the Bad Batch did it, because in a way that would be tying that show in with everything else.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, and you know, and it could be, to Ronaldo's point, it could be somebody we don't know. You know, it could be just a Jedi that we just never seen before. We don't know anything about, because given a timeline of everything, like Obi-Wan was pretty busy over on Utapau, dealing with Grievous. Yoda was over there trying to deal with Palpatine.
Well, even when they were, but at the time that Yoda was dealing with Palpatine, the Utapau thing was done, because that was when Yoda and Obi-Wan had the conversation of like, okay, I'll go deal with Anakin. Well, he was going to want to deal with the Emperor, and well, I can't kill him. It's like, well, you have to. So that was when Obi-Wan went to Mustafar, and then.
But that was after, though. That was after
Utapau, but at the same time, Yoda didn't go after the Emperor until Obi-Wan went to Mustafar.
Right.
Because when Obi-Wan went to Utapau and he killed Grievous,
showed up to the temple.
Yeah,
they both showed up.
They showed up at the temple, and not to mention the fact
to send a message out.
Yeah, and it was even before Mace went there, because basically Obi-Wan went back and told everybody, like, "Hey, I killed Grievous," and everybody thought the war was going to be over. And that didn't happen. Ronaldo says maybe it was a Jedi called McClunky, which is, anybody that doesn't know, that's basically a word that Greedo said during his little thing with Han, and I don't know,
be like some Rhodian swear word, I guess.
I think so. He said those tie-ins with the prequels and sequels are really good. And then, of course, he goes on to say it's a rant for another time.
No, he's talking about us earlier.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you should wait till you see chapter. All I'm going to say is wait till you see our review of Chapter 7 of the Book of Boba Fett. Rant time is in full mode on that one. You guys don't want to miss that, trust me. He says it's hard to be a Star Wars fan. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I really hope that the story group is working to make this stuff make sense. As long as it makes sense, I can hang with it. But the problem is that once they do something stupid, like some of the things they did with the sequel trilogy, they're kind of forever in canon. It's sort of like if you mess with something and you do it really stupidly, you've now ruined that storyline, and now everybody has to write around it, or maybe, which I still think they're going to be doing, is like a soft reboot of the sequel trilogy, because they have all this other stuff that's going on around it, that's leading up to it. And what they could do is they can sort of write around it to a point that the sequel trilogy, in context of everything that's around it, might actually be cool. We'll have to see. Jury's still out on that one. Ronaldo says, hey, at least we know Kylo doesn't kill him.
Right.
And then Joanne, who joins us, says, even though I'm not on the same level as your fans, I'm learning a lot about Star Wars by watching your show.
You know, that's why we do it.
Yeah, it's basically, well, that's one of the reasons why we do it. People can learn more about it in a fun way. And yeah, you know, no matter what level anybody's at, you know, it's whether you become
all
a Star
enjoyable.
Wars fan 2 weeks ago or, you know, 20 years ago. Or more of the
You could be a
case.
youngling, or you could be a grandmaster. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. Well, a lot of it, though, it doesn't even have to do with how long you've been a fan. It's really at what level of fandom are you? Do you just have a casual knowledge of it? In which
Right.
case, and that's where I say that we fall somewhere in the middle, because we are not the guys that are going to go through a scene frame by frame to find some little weird Easter egg. But at the same time, we can have these kind of conversations where a lot of people are like, whoa, man, this is, you know, this
It's
is pretty
deeper than what
intense.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I just think that that's going to be another big question that, and maybe we'll get that in season 3 of Mandalorian. You know, I think because well, I don't want to give away those who
Well,
haven't seen the finale yet. I guess whatever.
You can do it. I mean, it's fine. I mean, look, all the hardcores
Spoiler
have watched
alert.
it already. We're gonna review it on Monday. It's almost like this is the exact conversation we had last Friday, where it's
Last
like,
week, I know,
how
right?
much can I say about it? But just know that we go in depth of the Book of Boba Fett, Chapter 7, the season finale, on Monday. It's already in the can. It's ready to go. But we're going to reference some things, and they're going to be spoilers. So let me just take this time that while you guys are hitting that subscribe button and that like button and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss anything that we put out, you might want to avoid this part of the conversation if you're sensitive to spoilers because you haven't seen Chapter 7 yet. And now you're clear. You're all clear, kid. Let's...
Worst thing and go home.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so with Grogu, you know, kind of coming back to Mando, I think that's gonna, like, hopefully maybe we'll find some more or glean some more information about, you know, about him as far as what I don't know if we're gonna find, you know, maybe Ahsoka shows up again. I don't know, to bring Sabine in. Maybe that may be the case. And because Grogu's now with Mando, she might have something to say about it. Like, oh, well, how come you weren't with Master Skywalker? You know, I mean, we kind of figured you had a strong attachment, but, you know, and she might explain some things to him, like, oh, when Master so and so took him into hiding, this happened, and that's how he became. That's how you found him. Was this, you know, in this particular, and it could just be a passing conversation like that that would just answer that question for us.
Or maybe he's in a Bacta tank and he starts flashing back.
Maybe I know who saved them. I just figured it out. It's the Tusken Raiders.
That's it. He learned to be a Tusken. He's got like this little toothpick that's his gaffy stick.
Gaffy stick.
Well, but here's the thing that's funny about that whole thing. I mean, you know, are you going to be a foundling or a youngling? I mean, that's basically the choice, right? And I think, and I didn't allude to it. I basically said this during our review that you guys are going to see when it premieres on Monday, but his choice to me is infinitely more interesting because I think you can glean a lot more fascinating stories by him being a Mandalorian than if he were a Jedi, because now you're just the next Yoda.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, granted, it'd be kind of cool to see, I mean, in a way, because everybody's been clamoring, oh, I wonder what Yoda was like when he was just learning and all that. Okay, you could kind of do that with this if you wanted to. But to me, imagine Yoda is a Mandalorian. That's just really mind-blowing. And I think it's a lot more interesting.
Well, you got to wonder, like, so because Tar Vizsla was a Mandalorian and a Jedi.
Yep, I was just thinking that.
You know, I mean, who's
Sure.
to say that he still can't do
Sure.
both?
I mean, well, that's it. We really don't know. And again, that's the thing, is that you look at choices that he makes now, but again, later on, I mean, who knows? It's really interesting. I would like to see the story of Tar Vizsla. I mean, we had a
Me too.
little bit of it in the Clone Wars, but yeah, I mean, give me that series or movie.
You know what would be cool though is because we're so used to seeing people leave the Jedi Order, like after they become Jedi Knights and Masters and stuff like Dooku and Ahsoka but we never and Kylo, but we've never really seen like someone young reject it and then come back to it, and that would be cool if Grogu did that.
Yeah, that would be cool. But like you said, it also would give you a little bit of a glimpse because again, I'm sure what's locked in his mind is things like who saved him, where he's been, all this other stuff. And the other thing that you got to look at too is maybe down the line we get more flashbacks from him.
Mm-hmm.
I almost wish that. I mean, in a way, it'll be weird. It'll be weird when they have him talk.
Moments.
When they have Grogu talk, it's going to be very strange.
Yeah. Because you got to wonder if he's going to have like regular basic, or is he going to talk in riddles like Yoda,
or just even what he sounds like.
Yeah.
So I mean, that'd be great if he had, like what if he sounded like Stewie from Family Guy?
He gets Seth MacFarlane to do the voice.
Exactly. I mean, you don't know, right? I mean, Yoda has this gravelly kind of thing going, but I mean, does everybody sound like him?
Right.
Because if you think about it, look at everybody on Earth. We don't all sound the same.
True.
So it'll be interesting to see.
They're kind of species oriented, though. It's in a way. It's kind of like all lions sound the same, or all dogs. I mean, I won't say all dogs sound the same because you got the little chihuahuas that's like, and then you got like a big, Rottweiler or something like that. It's got this big booming, bark. But
yeah, but I mean, what a dog bark sounds like.
Exactly.
So I see what you're saying, and it could be because Grogu basically looks. There's not a whole lot of variations between him and Yoda. That could be. Got to wonder if Yoda was, maybe in the backseat of a speeder with Yaddle or something, and
exactly,
But that's another thing. I mean, look at how many.
Too much of an attachment.
Well, but you got to wonder. Again, you get people that were obsessed with Rey's lineage. I mean, I kind of really want to know who Grogu's mother and father were. To me, that would be even more telling.
Yeah, definitely.
Because where did he come from? How did he suddenly get in to the Jedi Order? Why aren't there more of them?
And you would think like Yoda will probably going to keep him close, considering that there's not many of his species.
Exactly.
And there's probably like so many questions that but I don't know. Like maybe it's better that he's away so he can not form that attachment. I don't know. It's
once
weird.
Again, it's all these. They're every
Questions.
Single time they reveal stuff, it's always more questions than answers. And I mean, again, tonight's topic was a little bit more esoteric. It wasn't really designed for here are the actual answers. It's really more of a discussion point to just just have a nice Friday night Star Wars discussion. But every once in a while, we like to do that. I mean, it
definitely.
It's kind of fun. Ronaldo joining back in says, I prefer they keep Grogu's past a secret.
And
yeah,
like Yoda, just keep.
I could see that. Well, here's the problem, though. And this is the only reason why
is explain too much, like then you have to go into Yoda, too.
Well, yes and no. Because, and again, even though you're not going too far back, you are getting a little bit of younger Yoda in the High Republic. But the problem with Grogu is that we see him as an infant. I mean, it's like what more past do you need? He was only like 15 or 20 years old, which would probably be like a 6-month-old in human years. I mean, we are seeing his past. The only thing we're missing is the stuff that's happening in the Clone Wars and things like that. See, with Yoda, it's different because Yoda's like 900 when we meet him. And, even in the High Republic, he's probably like 700. Whereas their prime is probably like maybe 200-300 years old, somewhere in there. Okay, I can hang with maybe keeping that a mystery. But with Grogu, it's almost like things are happening at this point, and then we meet him at this point. So you have this sort of like bookend that you need to fill in. Now, I would agree that it's not maybe a good idea to fill it in too much. I'm not looking for a highly detailed painting, but I wouldn't mind a sketch. I wouldn't mind maybe a little bit of an idea of where he was. I don't need to know, Dear Diary today. I don't need to know. We don't need another Facebook post or something.
I was just about to say, like a Facebook.
I
was just about to say,
I don't need the latest Instagram. Hey, hanging out at Mos Espa or whatever. I get that, but I do need to know some of the basics only because you're putting him right in the middle. This isn't like, he was like 20 years before Phantom Menace or something. No, we're filling this stuff in now. You're talking like right at episode 2 to now you're a little bit beyond episode 6.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a logical question. Because again, you had these big holes. You have, where was he?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. We're gonna have to figure out is like, where was he? Who had him? And and what happened to who had him? Because obviously they're not looking for him. Well, it doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. If they don't ever reveal any of this stuff, it's not the end of the world. It's somewhat of a gaping hole. And look, they could fill it in with comics or novels. I'm not saying that it needs to be acted out to us in a series or a movie, but it would be nice to just have, almost like you said, like a passing conversation or something that fills in a little bit more. It's not really necessary to the character too much. I guess it's almost, in a way, kind of like the Boba Fett Sarlacc pit thing. Did we really need to see him get out of the Sarlacc pit? No. If he was just out of the Sarlacc pit, just, okay, he got out. Or if they said, hey, you remember that time that you, used your flamethrower and got out, but we didn't see it? Okay, that would be better. Instead, they chose to actually show it. But really, either way is fine. It's just the problem that I have with I should say it like this. The problem that I have with keeping his past a secret is that there's too many other key factors involved that, you have this character that just appears out of nowhere, and it's kind of a big deal. This is where they're getting the blood to resurrect Palpatine. It goes back to the beginning of our conversation, right from the start of the show. He's a pivotal character.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't just
just
what was the name of the one Nick Nolte voice? The one, the Ugnaught, I have spoken.
Quill.
Yeah. See, Quill, you could get away with that kind of thing with Quill. I don't need to know Quill's past. I don't even care. You get it. Based on what you know of that character in season 1 of The Mandalorian, you get it. They're not, there's not, like, his blood is not the basis for some army or something. That would almost be like, and again, you could even make the argument, look, Jango Fett was kind of a mystery, and yet he's the one that seeded out all the clones.
Mm-hmm.
But they explained a lot of stuff.
Yeah, they did.
And he basically popped up in the beginning.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it would be nice. Like I say, it would be nice to have that information, but if we don't get it, it won't be the end of the world. I guess, we'll just have to live with it. But I really just want to see, like, the continuation of it now. It's like, okay, well, if you're not going to give us that, then it's like, all right, well, what is his ultimate purpose and his goal? And, what's his, I really would like to see what his destiny will be.
Sure.
Because I can't see Grogu walking around with like a blaster, like a Mandalorian, like, or him having like little helmet with ears. I mean, I can't see that.
It would be weird, but we'll have to see where it goes. Now, Ronaldo says, "Would you like to know Jar Jar's past?" I know I do.
No, I do not.
Because now it's actually good that you bring him up though, because this is an example of he may not be a pivotal character, but he's a character that did a very pivotal thing.
True. Which he was that vote for the...
Yeah, he's the distinction. He's the one that basically gave Palpatine the power to do everything that he's done. But here's the thing. We don't need to know his past because we pick up Jar Jar at a point where he becomes relevant to the story, and then everything is filled in. We know what happens. See, if Jar Jar's thing was sort of like Grogu, that would be like introducing him in The Phantom Menace, and then him popping up in episode 3. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, well Jar Jar's the one that pretty much gave the power to, the Emperor, and you would be like, well, wait a second, how did he even have that? You mean he's a senator? I mean, see what I'm saying? It's kind of like you need to fill those things in. That's the reason why Jar Jar was in episode 2 and episode 3, even though his role was diminished in each movie because nobody liked him. It's kind of like, okay, yeah, you're Senator Binks now. You basically have that storyline that's necessary that tells you this is why this character was able to do this and everything else. With Grogu, we don't know. It's like, okay, he has this Clone Wars thing, and then all of a sudden, he's got a bounty on his head being taken to Gideon. It's like, well, wait a minute. How? How did they even know? It's kind of like you said. Gideon, how did he even know? It's like, oh, we need the asset. We got to get his blood. How'd you even know he was there?
Yeah, or he was out there, or he even existed,
Right. I mean, why not Ahsoka? I mean, more people knew about Ahsoka than Grogu. So why not try to kidnap her and it's kind of like, oh, wait a minute, but this little guy is even stronger. It's like, well, how did you know that? See, that's why we need to know.
Yeah. Well, you weren't going to take Ahsoka down easily anyway. I mean, and I think that's another reason why they chose him, because it's a child, it's an infant. It's like, how dangerous can this thing be? I mean, it's a baby versus, Ahsoka's like this full blown, basically Jedi Knight running around, who's been trained by like, I don't know, like the top 4 best Jedi in all of history: Yoda, Mace, Anakin, Obi Wan, and Plo Koon. Like, really?
Well, but here's the thing, though. Here's what I think makes more of a difference, because I could easily counter that by saying, but you would think that it'd be an Ahsoka or somebody that powerful that would be protecting him. So how do you get unprotected?
That's what that's what I'm saying. Like, I think it was probably a lesser or less skilled Jedi Knight.
Kanan.
It's probably like,
You find out Kanan's the one, like, yeah, I was supposed to protect this little, it didn't work out so well. But that's not really the only point, though. I mean, I was making that other point to lead up to the reason why, because you remember when they took Anakin's blood, when Qui-Gon took Anakin's blood, and then, Obi Wan was like, wow, even Master Yoda's midi-chlorian count isn't that high. Which kind of shows Yoda, or his species, has a naturally high midi-chlorian count. That's insane. So obviously, I don't think it has as much to do with the fact that Grogu's an infant and he can't really defend himself. I think it has more to do with the fact, because remember, they introduced that scientist, and they didn't call it midi. What'd they call it? Like M something or whatever.
His M
count. Yeah, it's like, oh, come on, dude. We know what you're talking about. We know you mean midi-chlorian. You can say it. It's okay. We're all over it now. You can say the word midi-chlorian. We know what you're trying to say. But the point is, that species has a very high midi-chlorian count, and maybe, how like some things as a baby is like more concentrated and all that? That's probably the way maybe the midi-chlorians are. Maybe when that species is an infant, the midi-chlorian count, not only is it off the charts, but it's like super concentrated.
Possibly.
So,
Yeah. We got anything from Ronaldo? Because I know he's probably.
no, not yet. It's probably processing it all right now. Because I mean, this is one of those topics that I guess, although the whole balance of the force or whatever show that is, that we've just got like almost 2,000 views at this point. This is another one of those things that it could be, but it just depends on if people go for it or not, because it really is one of those big gaping holes in the whole plot line of I would say the current canon of Star Wars. I mean, and again, it's one of those things, because they give you enough information and just the way everything's laid out, it doesn't hit you right away. Like if you just casually watch all this stuff and you don't really think about it, then I don't think that it would be like, I don't think it would hit you in the face as much. But when you really stop and think about it, like think about all that we've discussed in the show tonight, there's a lot of things that I hadn't even thought about. It's kind of like, you'll bring up something, I'm like, oh yeah, well, if that's the case, and what about this? And it's just, now I'm almost angry about it. I'm going to write to Lucasfilm and be like, hey guys, I'm just saying, you're going to have to give us a little bit more on this whole Baby Yoda thing.
Well, everybody wants to know more about it. I mean, and that's the thing. And anytime you bring in a character, I mean, like that, of course, they knew once, let alone you bring a Jedi into the whole Mandalorian situation. But a species like Yoda at that age, where it's not talking, where it's not like, it's going to ask, you're going to have so many questions now. And they knew that. And that's why I'm really curious to see. I'm really curious to see how they handle answering what questions they answer, which ones they don't.
Well, it goes back to and how they will, right? Because you don't necessarily have to answer everything in the TV shows. You can supplement that with comics, and look at what they're doing with Crimson Dawn, right? They sort of introduced that in Solo. I was really happy to see that Black Sun still existed, because when Crimson Dawn came about, it almost seemed like that was the new canon replacement for Black Sun. But then they mentioned Black Sun. So I'm like, okay, cool. 'Cause Black Sun's really, really awesome. So I'm glad that that's still around. But with the whole Crimson Dawn thing, they were mentioned and you kind of knew about them from Solo. Okay, now they come out with all these comic books that just completely expand on the thing, to the point is where Crimson Dawn's really rooted into the whole thing. Another example would be the character of Rey Sloane, who's pretty much an Imperial officer that showed up in a lot of the new canon books, starting with A New Dawn, which was the very first new canon novel that was released after they deemed the other ones legends. She popped up as a captain. She ends up being like a Grand Admiral or something by the time the Aftermath trilogy comes out. And she's just all over the books and some of the comics. So I don't really think it's an accident that they're doing what they're doing, because like you said, you had to know once you came up with the character of Grogu that it's got to be, you can't just let that go. You have to maybe develop it, and you don't necessarily have to do all that within the Mandalorian show. You could do that outside of it, but yeah, you're going to have to explain some things.
Definitely.
All right, but the question is, as always, what do you guys think of this whole thing? Who do you think actually protected Grogu, and where do you think his story was going in between maybe when those memories were revealed, which was at some point around episode 3, because they were Order 66 things. So you have the memories that were unlocked in episode 3. We first meet him in season 1 of The Mandalorian. What do you guys think he's been doing? Let's continue this discussion. Put your comments in the comments section. Of course, we have a Facebook group which is Head to Head, a Star Wars community. So be sure to look at that, because obviously you put links to our shows, but a lot of times we'll get into some really good discussions with people on there too. And what we actually designed it to do was to be a continuation of the discussion here. So you're not going to want to miss that. So obviously Monday, you're definitely going to want to make sure that you check out our review of Chapter 7 of the Book of Boba Fett. That was the season finale, and you'll really hear what we had to say. And as an added bonus, we are going to try, because it's going to be a premiere, we are going to try to chat live with you guys on Monday night. If we're able to, we'll chat along with you guys. It's always a weird experience, because I know you've done it a couple of times. It's really weird listening to us talk and then commenting on it. It's like, and then you almost want to add stuff, right? Like, oh, wait, no, I want to add more to that point, or you wish maybe you'd said something differently or whatever. So it's always kind of weird commenting.
For us,
yeah, for us, it's weird commenting on our own comments. Because, we'll hear something in the show and maybe I'll put it in the chat or whatever. And then when people are chatting in during those premieres, we're basically talking to them, basically you guys, about what we're saying during the show. It's just a really weird experience, but it's fun. So hopefully one of us or both of us will actually be able to join you guys on Monday night at 8 for our Book of Boba Fett Chapter 7 review. So until then, of course, we'll be live with you guys again on Friday. Until then, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.